So Earendil, in short, you can think of Earendil as like something like NIM or Tor. It's a mixnet. It's peer-to-peer. The distinct feature of there are two really distinct features about Earendil. First of all, it's what I call ban resistant. So that's a little different from censorship resistant. The idea behind ban resistance is that not only is it that the Earendil cannot censor your messages, your ISP also cannot censor Earendil. So the network traffic that Earendil produces is indistinguishable from other traffic. So that builds on a lot of research I did kind of back in the days when I was researching like, traffic obfuscation and things like that. Also with my Geph project, which is a obfuscated VPN project. But that's actually very distinct. But I think that that's a big problem that most Web3 projects slash like, whatever word you want to use for Web3 projects don't really solve. Like for example, Monero is censorship resistant, but you can easily just block all Monero traffic. You can find all the list of all Monero nodes just by asking around the peer-to-peer network and then blacklisting it all. And China, for example, does that easily. Um, Rendell really tries to solve this problem, which I think is like an important part for actually keeping everything else alive, right? If one day like the state tries to crack down on Monero, you want to have a fallback like transport layer to run Monero on that they can't block. So the other part is more connected to the Mel blockchain, which is the incentives. And this is actually something I feel like is a really cool Mel application, which is that so you can build something like Lightning Network on Mel. It's a UTXO Bitcoin-like blockchain. Obviously, you can build something like Lightning Network on it. However, because Mel has much better light client support, you can actually monitor the status of your channels without trusting some full node, basically. Like your phone can fully participate in the payment channel network without trusting a single other person. And what this actually means is that the way Earendil incentives works is that we have a peer-to-peer network, and whenever we move data along the peer-to-peer network, we pay our immediate neighbor a micropayment over like this payment channel network. And essentially, the peer-to-peer layer isn't fully incentivized with micropayments. And this is actually a paradigm that doesn't work on Bitcoin, doesn't work on other blockchains, because if you try to build this on Bitcoin, every single peer-to-peer node has to pick some centralized party to trust, or they're going to run their own Lightning Network node, which is very heavyweight. Similarly, on Ethereum, you have to pick an RPC provider to ask about the status of your payments. And then you have this like octopus like topology where everything is actually connected to this like a few like providers, right? But with Mel, you can actually build a peer-to-peer network where every node kind of like machine to machine micropays for all the resources they use on each other. And it's all unattended, right? Like the user doesn't have to connect their wallet and then manually click approve on transactions. It's really like automatic. And in fact, like we're also going to build a mechanism where if you run out of money, you mine more Mel automatically. So like it's like this fully automated machine to machine economy of resources, and people bid for bandwidth resources. The algorithm would automatically pick the peer with the cheapest uplink and things like that. It's all unattended, and it's basically this whole like agorist marketplace of automated agents paying each other with like payment channels and being able to verify that everything's going correctly because of light clients. So I think that sort of paradigm is a huge kind of design space that's super underexplored, because before we have Mel, we don't really have good ways of sending crypto to each other fully automated and verifying that it actually happened without trusting a centralized third party or running a full node. So like once I feel like that design space is opened, I can see a lot of potential in just incentivized peer-to-peer networks overall. And by incentivized, I actually don't mean stuff like NIM, where there's like a smart contract that takes fees and subsidizes people. Just literally when in a peer-to-peer network with peer-to-peer payments for like bilateral resources. Like imagine I'm torrenting and I just pay for bandwidth from my peers and then I pay the lowest bidder, right? And none of that requires a smart contract. It just requires some ultimate settlement layer for these micropayments, which is like some payment channel on the blockchain. Uh, and I think like that design space would make a lot of things much, much easier. Like how can you, let's say, file storage, right? Like you don't really necessarily need a complex incentive system like Arweave or Filecoin. Just pay people, pay your peers, like pay your peers when you download from them, them when you rent storage from them. And if they delete your files, go pay somebody else. It's a free market, right? I think this sort of paradigm of just like this automated free market of peers paying each other can enable a lot of applications that previously were really hard to build. So I think that's probably currently what I feel like is the coolest application of Mel. But I think there's a lot of other ones. I think like public key management for encrypted chat is another huge one, right? Like, how can I actually do end-to-end encrypted chat with you and I know your public key without trusting some centralized provider? That's also a big problem. Like, that again, you need light clients to solve. You can't solve with ENS because then you're just trusting Infura or Alchemy or whatever RPC provider as your PKI. And that'll also enable just a huge design space that currently doesn't exist.
Unchecked governments have eradicated privacy and truth. Those who resist are brought down swiftly, but we refuse to submit. Unapunks are freedom fighters, protected by encrypted shadows. The future we're building is sovereign and uncensorable. The moonlit night is coming.